Hey, my name's Ethan. I'm 26 years old, born and raised in a small town in northern Pennsylvania. I've been working as a full-time mechanic since I was 18. Greasy hands, busted knuckles, long hours, and not a lot of money, but it's honest work. I like fixing things. I like solving problems. My dad had a little auto shop before he passed, and I've been trying to keep it going ever since. I live in a modest single-story house, nothing fancy. But I never needed much, just stability and love. That part, I had. Her name is Claire. Claire and I met in high school. She was always the kind one, the smart one, the one with a calming voice and eyes that made you feel like everything would be okay. We drifted apart after graduation, like most people do. She went off to college to study education, and I stayed here to work. We reconnected about 2 years ago at a coffee shop during a snowstorm. Total chance. She smiled at me like not a day had passed, and just like that, the years disappeared. We started talking again, hanging out more and more, and it didn't take long. Last spring, we got married. Small backyard ceremony, close friends, simple vows. It was perfect. Life after that felt like something out of a dream. She was teaching first grade at the local elementary school, and I was finally getting enough business at the shop to take Sundays off. We were planning a trip to Europe the next summer. We even talked about starting a family within the next year or so. It was a random Wednesday morning, cloudy, a little cold. Claire was running late and couldn't find her favorite scarf. I remember laughing at how dramatic she was about it. I made her coffee while she tied her hair up. She kissed me quickly, said she loved me, and ran out the door. That was the last moment that felt normal. At 8:43 a.m., I got the call. She had been in a car accident, hit by a truck at an intersection on her way to school. She was in critical condition. I don't remember much of the drive to the hospital. I remember my hands shaking on the wheel and my stomach in knots. The entire world felt like it had tipped sideways. When I got there, the doctors were working on her. Tubes, wires, machines everywhere. She was unconscious. A nurse took me aside and explained that she had suffered a traumatic brain injury, severe swelling. She had slipped into a coma. The words barely landed. Coma? That's not supposed to happen to someone who was just drinking coffee in your kitchen 45 minutes ago. They told me the next 48 hours were critical. I stayed in the waiting room, not sleeping, barely breathing. I called her parents. Her mom screamed when I told her. Her dad didn't say a word. Claire made it through those 2 days, but the swelling didn't go down. They transferred her to a larger hospital in the city. I went with her. I wasn't going to let her be alone. Not now. I started calling everyone, neurologists, brain trauma experts, even some out-of-state clinics I found online. If there was a way to bring her back, I wanted to find it. Some doctors took my calls. Some didn't. One specialist offered a treatment plan involving targeted hypothermia therapy and aggressive neurostimulation. It was expensive, way out of reach, but I said yes anyway. I emptied our savings, sold my dad's old truck, took out a loan under the shop. I spent every day by her bedside. I talked to her like she could hear me. I read her favorite books out loud. I told her about the news, the weather, the things I fixed at the shop. I played the playlist we made for our honeymoon. I held her hand and kissed her forehead and begged her to fight. But days turned into weeks, and weeks turned into months. Her eyes never opened. Her body never moved. The doctor started using phrases like persistent vegetative state and no measurable response. One night, a nurse asked me gently if I considered signing a DNR. I almost punched the wall. I kept saying, she's still in there. I know it, but even I started to feel cracks forming. I remember sitting by her side one night, watching her chest rise and fall, the steady beep of the monitor. I whispered, Claire, if you're in there, just give me something. Anything. Nothing. The days got quieter. Fewer visitors. Fewer updates. Everyone started to accept what I refused to believe. Then came the morning that broke me. I walked into her room, as usual. A new nurse was on shift, a young woman with gentle eyes. She was adjusting Claire's for. The heart monitor was still doing its slow, robotic beat. I sat down and stared at my wife's face, memorizing every detail for what felt like the 100th time. Then, suddenly, everything went quiet. The monitor flatlined. A shrill tone cut the air. The nurse turned pale. She checked Claire's pulse. Nothing. She stepped back, lowered her voice, and whispered, "She's gone." The room spun. My ears started ringing. I stood up, dizzy, trying to hold on to something. No, no, no. And then, just as I reached for Claire's hand, her fingers twitched. I froze. My mind screamed at me not to hope. But then she moved again. Not a spasm, not a reflex. A movement. A slow curl of her fingers around mine. I yelled. The nurse gasped and hit the emergency button. Doctors rushed in. Machines rebooted. One of them shouted something about a false code. Claire wasn't gone. She was still here. They say your mind blocks out certain things in moments of shock. I believe that now, because I barely remember what happened in the minutes after Claire's fingers moved. I remember shouting. I remember the crash of footsteps as the code team rushed in. I remember being pulled away as doctors swarmed her bed. Tubes were reconnected. Monitors rebooted. Orders barked. I remember someone yelling, "She's responding. She's responsive." I stood in the hallway, staring at the floor with my hands shaking. I didn't know whether to cry or throw up. Everything I thought I had accepted, everything they told me to prepare for, was suddenly turned upside down in a single second. They moved her to ICU immediately. For the first time in months, they didn't talk to me like I was crazy. A neurologist came in to evaluate her condition. They ran a battery of tests, checked her brain activity again, examined her eye movements, her limbs. A few hours later, one of the senior doctors pulled me aside. "She's not out of the woods," he said carefully, "but this is significant. Patients in deep coma states rarely show spontaneous motor responses like that. Does it mean she's waking up?" I asked. He paused. "It means she might be trying to." That was the moment something shifted, not just in her condition, but in me. I had been holding on with desperation for months. But now, there was something real to hold on to. Hope didn't feel like denial anymore. It felt like a beginning. Claire didn't open her eyes that day, but her fingers moved again that night. When I held her hand, she curled her pinky slightly, like she was trying to answer me. The hospital started new treatments immediately. Mild neurostimulation, increased oxygen flow, changes in medication. The doctor explained that when a patient shows any signs of reactivity, the brain might be re-engaging certain pathways. It wasn't a miracle, he said. It was biology waking up. Still, no one promised anything. No one said she would recover, or talk again, or even wake up fully. But the language had changed. They weren't telling me to prepare anymore. They were telling me to wait. I stayed in the hospital room every night after that. I wouldn't go home. I set up a little cot beside her bed and kept a notebook where I documented every little thing. Tuesday, 9:34 a.m. Left finger twitched during Mozart piano track. Wednesday, eyes flickered briefly at 2:13 p.m. Every time she moved, I felt like the world shifted a degree back into place. Claire's parents flew in again. Her mom cried when she saw her and said, "I knew she wasn't ready to go." Her dad, usually stoic, just stood there holding her hand for almost an hour without speaking. Everyone was still cautious, but I could see it in their faces. That small flicker of light had returned. After 10 days of these micro-responses, Claire opened her eyes. It was brief, maybe 5 seconds, but I'll never forget it. I was talking to her like I always did, telling her about the latest thing the nurses said, something about a cat running loose in the ER. Then suddenly, her eyelids moved, just a little, then opened fully. Her eyes looked straight ahead, not at me, not with focus, but they were open. I hit the call button so hard I nearly broke it. A nurse ran in. I couldn't speak, just pointed. Doctors confirmed it. She had regained consciousness. But that didn't mean everything was okay. She didn't talk. She didn't respond to voices. She couldn't move anything but her fingers and, occasionally, her eyes. They told me this was called a minimally conscious state, a phase some patients enter when emerging from coma. It can last weeks, months. Some people stay there forever. Still, it was a step forward, and we hadn't had one of those in too long. The hospital assigned a full neurological rehabilitation team. Physical therapists, speech therapists, occupational therapists. Claire's care plan was rewritten. I started researching everything I could: brain plasticity, motor cortex damage, coma recovery timelines. I joined online forums full of families like mine, waiting, hoping, praying, but it was hard, and it didn't get easier fast. There were days where nothing changed, days where she wouldn't open her eyes, days where a nurse would gently tell me not to get too excited yet. Some nights I'd go out to the parking lot, sit in my truck, and scream. I never did that in front of her. I wanted her to feel nothing but peace when I was there. I read to her every night. Sometimes she blinked, sometimes not. 3 weeks after she opened her eyes, she squeezed my hand deliberately. Not a twitch, a squeeze. A doctor saw it happen. He confirmed it. She was responding. That night, I told her everything again. How I'd sold the truck, taken out loans. How I knew she could hear me. How she had already proven every single doctor wrong. I didn't care how long it took. I was going to be here. I wasn't going anywhere. And then, for the first time in months, I saw her lips move. She didn't speak. No sound came out. But her lips shaped something. It looked like one word. Hi. I broke down right there. Put my head on the edge of her bed and just cried. I didn't care if we never got back the life we had. I didn't care if we never traveled or danced or ran through the rain together again. She was still here. That was enough. Recovery isn't a straight line. I learned that the hard way. After Claire first moved her fingers and then opened her eyes, there was this electric sense of momentum in my chest, like we were finally getting somewhere. But real life isn't a movie. There's no fast forward through the ugly parts. No uplifting montage that skips the weeks when nothing happens. Just long days, harder nights, and slow progress that sometimes feels like no progress at all. The days following that first-hand squeeze and her silent hi were surreal. She didn't speak again for a while. Her lips would move, her fingers would twitch, her eyelids would flutter, but she still couldn't form words or make eye contact. It was like watching someone come back to life one cell at a time. The doctors told me she was technically awake, but in a fragile state. They were cautious about everything: stimulation, light, sound, even how long I was allowed to talk to her at once. She'd tire out fast, and sometimes she'd fall into deep sleep-like episodes that looked just like the coma. Those scare me more than anything. But I didn't miss a single day. I learned her schedule. I learned which physical therapists made her blink more. I noticed which songs made her fingers move and which voices calmed her heart rate. I began to recognize tiny signs. Her eyebrows rising, her left shoulder twitching slightly, her fingers curling at certain sounds. The team started using a letterboard to test basic responses. I held her hand while a therapist pointed to letters, and if Claire blinked at the right one, we'd piece together words. The first full word she spelled was cold. That alone made me smile like a fool for hours. I brought her soft blankets the next day, the ones she loved from home. Eventually, we got to Ethan. She blinked out my name. Once, twice, 3 times. I could have dropped to the floor. Speech therapy began slowly. At first, it was just vowel sounds, soft throat movements. Then came simple syllables. The first full sound that resembled a word was yes. And it was a clear yes, deliberate, breathy, fragile, but real. Her voice was different. Softer, slower, but it was hers. That moment, the first time she said yes, I just whispered back, yes, baby, yes to everything. You're doing it. The weeks blurred. Her speech improved slightly each day. Not fast, but steady. Hi, love, pain, more, you. Sometimes full sentences, sometimes fragments. One day, after I read her a passage from a book she used to love, she whispered, "You always read it too fast." I almost laughed through my tears. Her mind was there. That was the miracle. Physically, though, she was limited. The damage to her spinal cord during the accident had been more severe than they originally thought. She couldn't move her legs. Her right arm had very little coordination. Her left was better, enough to hold a spoon with help or press a button. The prognosis was firm. She wouldn't walk again. At least, not without major breakthroughs in medical science. When they told us that, Claire stayed quiet for a long time. She just stared at the ceiling, tears rolling down her face, not making a sound. I didn't speak either. I just held her hand and let her grieve that loss in her own time. Later that night, she whispered, "I'd rather be here in this body than not here at all." From that point on, she fought. Every single day, the rehab center we were transferred to specialized in neurotrauma. It was state-of-the-art. We stayed there for almost 3 months. Claire had daily sessions, speech, physical therapy, occupational therapy. She hated the word progress because it always made her feel like she wasn't doing enough. So we called it the climb. Every inch forward was a new rock we were pulling ourselves over. The therapist pushed her, and she pushed back harder. I watched her struggle to sit upright for more than 10 seconds. I watched her try to feed herself mashed potatoes with trembling hands. I watched her fail, cry, scream, and keep going. And I wasn't a spectator. I became part of the team. They trained me how to help with exercises, how to stretch her arms, how to lift her safely without hurting her back. At night, we'd practice whispering words. I'd quiz her with flashcards like a kid preparing for a spelling bee. We laughed. We cried. We slept with her hand in mine almost every night. Slowly, she regained control of her left hand. She learned to operate her wheelchair with her thumb. She started brushing her teeth with a specialized handle. She couldn't stand, but she could sit for longer periods without fainting. We celebrated every tiny win like a championship. One day, her therapist said, "Claire, you've got more fight in you than most people I've met." And Claire, without missing a beat, said, "That's because I got Ethan." I had to walk out of the room for a minute to pull myself together. We left the rehab center 6 months after the accident. Claire was in a chair. Her body changed forever, but she could talk, express herself, laugh, make jokes, remember everything from before. Her personality, her soul, her mind, untouched. We moved back into our little house, which was no longer suited for someone in a wheelchair. So I got to work. I tore down the front steps and built a ramp, converted the bathroom, installed handrails, lowered counters, widened doorways. The house didn't feel the same, but that wasn't what mattered. She was home. Our life would never be what we planned. No more hikes. No dancing in the kitchen. No weekend road trips on impulse. But we found something new, something deeper. We made new routines. Morning tea instead of coffee. Crossword puzzles instead of hikes. Books on audio. Shows with subtitles. Picnics in the backyard, even if the chair got stuck in the grass sometimes. We talk more. About real things. About fear, anger, love, time, and gratitude. Claire told me one night, "I used to think I had a perfect life, but now I know what real life is. And it's not about walking or dancing. It's about waking up next to someone who never gave up on you." And I told her, "You're still the strongest person I know." It's been 3 years since the accident. When I say that out loud, it doesn't sound real. Sometimes I still wake up expecting to hear Claire humming in the kitchen, the way she used to, barefoot, and in that old hoodie she wouldn't throw away. And then I hear the soft mechanical hum of the wheelchair from the hallway, and I remember we're living a different life now. But it's still ours. Claire never walked again. That part of the doctor's prognosis turned out to be true. The spinal cord damage was too deep, too permanent. She's paralyzed from the waist down, and there are still days when her hands shake so much she can't even hold a toothbrush. But what the doctors didn't see coming was everything else she got back. Her mind? Sharp as ever. Her voice? Softer but steady. Her sense of humor? Maybe even stronger than before. And the way she looks at me? Still the same. Still Claire. After we got back home, it took time to rebuild. Physically, emotionally, financially. The house was a mess of construction for a while. I worked during the day at the shop and did renovations at night. We couldn't afford a nurse, so I learned to do everything: transfers, hygiene routines, physical therapy stretches. At first, it was exhausting. There were moments I sat in the bathroom with the door shut and just cried into my hands. But I never once regretted staying. People always asked, "How do you do it?" I never had a good answer. I still don't. You just do it. When it's the person you love, the one who would have done the same for you, you don't keep score. You just keep going. Claire didn't want to be seen as the girl in the chair. That was a big thing for her. She started documenting her journey on a small blog. Nothing fancy, just honest posts about daily life, her emotions, the messy parts, the small victories. People found it, shared it. A few local news outlets picked it up. And suddenly, Claire had a voice again, one that reached far beyond our small town. She even gave a talk at a community event 2 years after the crash. I stood in the back of the room while she told a packed crowd. I lost a lot that day, but I didn't lose everything. I didn't lose me. The applause was loud, but the way she looked at me afterward, that meant more than anything. We built a new rhythm. Sunday mornings became our tradition. I'd wheel her out to the porch, wrap her in a blanket, hand her a cup of tea, and sit beside her as the world woke up. Sometimes we talked. Sometimes we just listened to the wind. It became our way of saying, we made it through another week. Her body kept changing. Some days were good. She could move her arm just enough to feed herself. Other days, her energy would drop so low she couldn't even speak. She called those her fog days. I just stay close, remind her that it was okay, that she didn't have to be strong every single second. Eventually, we adjusted. The shop was doing well enough for me to cut back my hours. I worked part-time, stayed home more. We traveled once, just a short trip, a nearby lake resort with accessible cabins. It took 2 weeks to plan and 6 hours to drive. But when we got there, and I wheeled her to the edge of the dock and we watched the sunset in silence, she whispered, I never thought I'd see something this beautiful again. I squeezed her hand. That moment alone made every mile worth it. Financially, we weren't rich. Far from it. But we had enough. Enough to keep the lights on, enough to stay in our home. Enough to be okay. Emotionally, we became stronger than we'd ever been. There were hard talks. Nights when Claire cried about the kids we might never have. Days when I felt like I was failing her because I couldn't fix the one thing that mattered most. But we didn't hide those feelings. We faced them, together. One night, lying beside her, I asked, do you miss who you used to be? She was quiet for a long time. Then she said, I miss the ease, the independence. But no, I don't miss her. She didn't know how strong she was. I know now. That's when I realized something. Claire never went back to who she was. And she didn't need to. She became someone new, someone braver, deeper, tougher. Someone I loved just as much, maybe even more. Last year, we renewed our vows. In the backyard again. Just close friends and family. Claire wore a white dress that I helped zip up. I wore a suit I hadn't touched since our wedding day. She read her vows from her lap, looking up at me with eyes that had seen more pain and more love than I thought possible. I promise to love you in sickness and in health, she said. And somehow, through it all, you loved me enough to bring me back. I couldn't speak when it was my turn. I just knelt beside her chair and held her hand. That said more than any words ever could. Today, our life isn't what we planned, but still beautiful. We don't run through fields or dance in kitchens, but we laugh. We fight like real people. We cry. We dream smaller dreams, maybe, but more meaningful ones. We celebrate the little things, buttoning a sweater, rolling outside without help, reading a full chapter out loud. We've become experts at finding joy in the tiny wins. Claire still blogs. She's mentoring other women now who've gone through spinal trauma. Some of them have never met her in person, but they call her the reason I kept going. That's who she is now. Not a victim, not a patient, a lighthouse. And me? I'm just a guy who never let go of her hand. We never got our honeymoon in Europe. We never bought the house on the hill we used to talk about. But we got something else. We got a second life. A quiet one, a hard one, but a real one, full of slow mornings, honest conversations, and the kind of love that survives the fire and comes out changed, but intact. So no, she'll never be the same, but she's still herself, and we're still us.